So for those of you who have just joined us, we'll just give it 1 or 2 more minutes for everyone to join in. Okay, usually it takes about a minute for, to log in and whatnot. So I think we'll get started. First of all, I'd like to welcome all of our alumni, our HQP alumni, to today's Where Are They Now career series, career series. And before we actually, embark on the conversation that we're having with today's alumni, I'd first like to remind you that our next session is taking place on Thursday, September 30th from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so in a few minutes, I'll post a link to Zoom, which is where you can register for this event. And coming soon, you can always look at our website for additional information on that session. The other reminder I'd like to make is that you can currently register for our Summit for Cancer Immunotherapy that's taking place November 21st and November 22nd of this year. And if you haven't done so already, you can submit an abstract if you're an HQP. And so again, the information for this is available on our Summit for CI website, which is cancersummit.ca. And again, I'll share that information in the chat box as well. Registration is free, and we really encourage all of our HQP within our community to attend. So with that being said, I'd like to, at this point, turn it over to Rita Gill, who will be moderating today's session. So Rita, I'll take it or turn it to you.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you so much to the panelists for being here today and all of our attendees as well. But I'll just start off by introducing our panelists with a couple of sentences. And so we have Dr. Nicole Forbes, who is currently a scientific project coordinator at the Public Health Agency of Canada. She started off with a BA in liberal arts, then went on to fast track a BSc honors in microbiology and immunology from Dalhousie University. She completed her graduate studies with Dr. Earl Brown and went on to work in the lab of Dr. Jean-Simon Diallo for around 7 years before moving to her current position. Next, we have Dr. Marie-Laurence Tremblay, who is currently a research ethics manager at Nova Scotia Health. She graduated with her PhD in biochemistry and molecular biology from Dalhousie University and went on to pursue her postdoctoral fellowship at the Biomedical Translation Imaging Center in Halifax, before shifting from research scientist to her current position. And finally, we have Dr. Margie Mooders, who is a freelance medical writer at Wouters Writing. She obtained her MSc in human pathobiology and toxicology from the Radboud University in, I believe it's pronounced Nijmegen, but correct me if I'm wrong, and her PhD in cancer immunology from the University of Groningen. She went on to complete her postdoctoral training in cancer immunotherapy at BC Cancer before moving on to her current position as medical and science writer. And so I'd like to welcome you guys again for being here today. And I'm going to start this off by just asking you to give a little bit of a further introduction into your career path and some things that I didn't mention and that weren't mentioned in your bio. And so we'll just go by the order that I can see it, which is Marie, then Nicole, and then Margie.
Putting me on the spot. Yeah, so as you mentioned, like I did my undergrad degree pretty much almost at the same time as Nicole. And yeah, decided to follow my path in like biochemistry and did a PhD working on spider silk in the lab of Dr. Jan Rainey. And that was a lot of fun. I did a lot of molecular dynamics. I worked with nuclear magnetic resonance, looked at protein structures, kind of learned a little bit about quantum chemistry, but never really mastered it. And so from there, I wanted to do a little bit something more applicable, because going from basic sciences to really like seeing what your discoveries actually lead to in the end was really important for me and something of value. So I switched gears and went into MRI research in the lab of Dr. Kim Brewer, where I got to work on essentially on cancer, and where I got involved with BioCanRx, where we looked at molecular dynamics and molecular imaging and tracing cells within live animals, and more particular immune cells in response to cancer immunotherapy. Now, that work is very specialized, doing especially animal MRI and PET. And so I went on to do a MyTax internship with IMV, or formerly known as Immunovaccine, where I did a lot of work for them in terms of their vaccine development and seeing like the mechanism of action, how it actually works and where the cell goes. And then from then, I don't know, just had like a switch in career. Wanted something a little bit more stable than looking from contract to contract to contract. And so landed this job as research ethics manager. And let me tell you, it was a big learning curve. So I can tell you all about it in the next hour.
Thank you so much, Marie. All right, we'll go on to Nicole now.
Hi, everyone. I'll just pretend that I can see all of your faces. So my name is Nicole Forbes. I probably know a few of you just because I have been involved in quite a few BioCanRx projects. So if I don't know you, I might know your PIs or 1 or 2 degrees of separation. But yeah, so I think Rita already kind of gave my early intro. I'm originally from the United States, so I went to Canada for undergrad and then stayed for grad studies. I went from looking at evolutionary biology of influenza viruses and kind of understanding adaptive mutations that are associated with virulence, which is of course really, really relevant as a virologist right now. All of a sudden it's like your thesis that seemed so far away from anything relevant, or so hard to get someone to understand why you would look at that if they weren't in science, to like being like really, really pertinent and just really a hot topic with everything going on with SARS-CoV-2. So I went from having my PhD to actually figuring out what I could do with it. And so I wanted to see how I could take my kind of like basic science knowledge and understanding of viruses, molecular biology, molecular genetics, and like hands-on skills of like virology, so to speak, into a applicable field, an industrial sort of field. And so I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to get out of academia completely. And Dr. John Bell was really fantastic with providing some guidance for this. And he ended up introducing me to Dr. Jean-Simon Diallo, who is leveraging his technology and viral sensitizing small molecules. And at the time, he was just getting his lab started, and he really needed to find a virologist that could see what these small molecules could do in terms of improving the production of virus-based therapeutics. And so that could be any sort of vaccine preventable disease that has a vaccine that's actually derived from a virus that you have to grow up and propagate, be it either in cell culture or in eggs, in embryonated eggs. And so that was my project for about 5 years in his lab. And then again, I kind of wanted to change, and it led to some really cool discoveries, and I'm on some IP, and that was a really great experience. Awesome lab. But then I ended up actually kind of tethering that project with one that Dr. Rebecca Auer was working on, who was also funded by BioCanRx. It was to try and look at the clinical translation of an infected cell vaccine for hematopoietic malignancies, as well as peritoneal carcinomatosis. And I worked a lot with Sarwat Khan, who is going to be doing the next of these, as well as working with John Bell to try and manage a couple of the grants that he was on that were larger and more complicated in terms of like actually like continuing their like renewals and all the stuff that kind of goes on in the background for like larger grants like that. And so I did that for a couple of years, and then I ended up actually moving over to the dark side, and I got a job in the government working in a lab. on next-gen sequencing of foodborne pathogens using microfluidics. It was a project co-funded by Health Canada and NRC. And then after just 5 months, I ended up networking my way into a secondment at the Public Health Agency of Canada. At the time, I thought I'd be at the NACI Secretariat just working on normal files, but then I started on like April 1st, right after lockdown in 2020. And so I ended up working on COVID, and I've been working on COVID ever since. And I've looking forward to one day not working on COVID, but it's been really fun and a really amazing ride. And I don't regret any of those amazing things that I just mentioned. So happy to discuss any of them in later detail if anyone has any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. All right, so we'll move on to our last panelist. Is it Maartje or Margie? Or how is it? Maartje, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I got that funky name because I'm originally from the Netherlands. And I did most of my education there, hence the funny university names that you had to mention there. And the system is a bit different there when it comes to master's and PhD grad school. So in the Netherlands, you have to first do a master's before you can enter a PhD program. And the PhD is more of like applying for a job and you get paid. So it has its benefits over there. So I had always been interested in cancer research. And so during my master's, I got to do 2 lab projects that my university allowed you to do anywhere you want. So I always wanted to go international. So I did a project in Belgium on microRNAs and breast cancer. And then also ended up in Kingston at Queen's University to do a lab rotation on benzene toxicity. And I absolutely loved it in Canada. Seriously, considered staying for a PhD, but due to financial reasons, so went back to the Netherlands. And that's where I first got in touch with cancer immunology, found a PhD position studying the immune environment in ovarian cancer. And absolutely loved it, really loved research, and really thought I wanted to have a career in academia. So at about the end of my PhD, I decided I wanted to go back to Canada. So that's when I started reaching out to Canadian researchers. And I was particularly interested in the work Brad Nelson was doing in Victoria. So I reached out to him and managed to get an interview and a position there. So that was great. And yeah, working there for a couple of years, getting in touch with BioCanRx, got involved in some of the projects there as well with regard to organizing trainee day and judging abstracts, for instance, for the summer students. Learned a lot and at some point realized that academia actually wasn't the right path for me. Got a bit into an identity crisis of what else I wanted to do then. And that's when I started attending lots of these types of webinars to learn from other people what they were doing and reaching out to others and ask them about their jobs. And at one of these webinars, I encountered freelance academic. I never thought that was a thing, but it sounded very interesting to me. And at some of these other webinars, I encountered medical writing, and I realized that that was really something that appealed to me. And at some point, I realized there was a whole community of freelance medical writers, and there was a lot of work in that area. So that's kind of when I started trying to figure out how to do that. So I took a course on how to set up a freelance business and slowly started doing that kind of on the side next to my postdoc, like in the evenings and weekends. And then in January 2020, I went full time. Great timing, right before pandemic, of course. But yeah, so the first 2 months I had like increasing clients and lots of fun projects, and then suddenly everything was quiet for a couple of weeks. But luckily we're in the medical business, so things lifted up really fast after, because everyone realized there was a lot of work to do around COVID, for instance. But also companies, etc., that had to pivot and needed writers for that. So yeah, I've been growing my business ever since, and it's been real fun. Also a steep learning curve in that sense, just like Marie said. And yeah, I'll be happy to discuss more about that.
Thank you so much, Maartje. And just a reminder to everybody in our audience, our attendees, feel free to use our Q&A chats to ask any questions you may have for the panelists. You can also use the raise hand function and we'll unmute you and you can ask your question there. But I'll start off with moderated questions while we wait for those. Each and every single one of you seems to have veered off from your, I would say, maybe original track and have gone into these different and interesting positions. Whereas some of you have mentioned, you kind of felt like a fish out of water where you had to reorient yourself and had a steep learning curve. So a question I have for all of you is, what was your day-to-day like? Or what is your day-to-day like? And I guess we'll start in the same order with Marie and Nicole and then Maartje.
So you mean like day-to-day in my current job? Yeah, so it's interesting. So I'm in management now. And so what I do is I manage a team, I manage an operation. Basically, being the REB manager for Nova Scotia Health means that all clinical research that has Nova Scotia Health on it, which is a provincial healthcare, goes through my office. And we've also recently changed governments, which is they're going to be very tough on healthcare and to try and basically make the system better. So take down what we have now and put it back, hopefully to make it so that it actually works. That was a result from COVID and overcrowded emergency rooms. And research has a big part to play in patient care. And so where my role fits in is that we're currently looking at research revitalization processes. So just completely turning over what we used to do because it just doesn't work that well, to reinventing ourselves and rebranding. And so my day from day to day is I'm in a lot of meetings. I love being in meetings. I love thinking strategically, thinking about a lot of project management. So we have an idea. So how are we going to implement that idea? Well, first of all, you have to draw it up, perhaps make a proposal, and then so I write up a lot of little proposals, communications, talk a lot with different stakeholders, and then who do we need to actually implement this versus people that need to be informed or people that just need to be consulted. And yeah, that's a lot of, when I sum up my job, I'm basically on Zoom every day because I work from home. And I take phone calls and I answer emails, but each one of those is so important because it's part of the research process. So when people don't know how to submit an ethics application or they don't know where they fall in the category, should they submit to REB, should they submit to DAL or to the IWK because we're multi-jurisdictional, that's where I come into play. So I help them set up that side of their research, which is a huge component of clinical research. Yeah, essentially, I think I'll cut it there and let others say what their day-to-day looks like.
Thank you. Then we'll go on to Nicole.
Okay, so my day-to-day, like Marie, is at home. So, I mean, it looks like I'm wearing a dress shirt and I can tell you I'm wearing pants, but honestly, it's those kind of days when no one really knows what's going on besides what they can see in your camera. And I'm just used to that now. It was hard to get used to it. I don't know if Marie said if she started when it was already virtual or not, but I definitely did. I think I met people in my work the first time in September, maybe like once before, but September 2020. And then I've been on site 3 times total to like grade office supplies. So first of all, that's, basically I work in the kitchen. My kids have been swarming all around me. They're going back to school next week. And I try to get through pretty vicious days. So right now I'm helping at the Secretariat for the National Advisory Committee on Immunization. So I'm working on files associated to COVID-19 and vaccines. And so, there's a lot of questions on how to best use COVID-19 vaccines, as you can imagine. And it's been very, very, very busy. And so like Marie said, similarly, I'm in meetings all day. I have between 4 to 9 hours of meetings a day. And then I have quite a lot of work to get done too. And my what I do ranges from like the very like specific aspect of like data extraction. Like that's kind of like something came out and it was like really pivotal. Like, what do we do with that? So like I'm like literally going in and taking out like the vaccine effectiveness data and looking at the safety and all that stuff at times, like when warranted. I'm with one of maybe like 30 to 40 people on our team right now. I'm also leading several teams on specific research policy questions for COVID-19 vaccines. I help set up subcommittees. I liaise with other parts of government, other parts of the Public Health Agency of Canada quite frequently. And I have to do team meetings and small group meetings. I have two awesome interns that are also affiliated with BioCanRx, HQP. Basically they're pushing forward a research review on immunogenicity and immune responses of COVID-19 mRNA vaccines, which is super cool. And so I'm like helping like supervise them in their project responding to like last minute urgent things like so like because working for the government, like so anytime there's like a question on like a biological immunological aspect or even like really technical like manufacturing, like you might get it thrown to you and you might have an hour to respond to it, and then they send it to wherever it needs to go. And I say they because it's like the mysterious policy people. So but yeah, like it really ranges in intensity and in like subjective work, but I work with an awesome team and it's like super collaborative and everyone is like really maximizing their brain capacity at all times in my team. It's awesome. It actually reminds me a lot about being at HQP when I was affiliated with BioCanRx. So it's pretty fun.
Thank you. And then we'll go on to Maartje.
Yeah, a big difference with the other two and with also being a researcher in a lab is that I don't have many meetings, and it was quite surprising to me how much time that opened up for, work, which was a big change. Of course, it's also, you're a lot more alone, so you're more working alone from home. I also started working from home right before the pandemic. And so at first I was working alone, but now suddenly I have a colleague here because my partner is also working from home. So yeah, I don't know what it's going to be like when things go back to normal, but we'll see about that. My day-to-day is highly variable because it highly depends on whatever deadlines I have for different projects. So I work for biotech, academics, government, nonprofits, all types of organizations, and a variety of different types of documentation. So it can be academic manuscripts, it can be IRB applications, study protocols, summaries, blogs, ebooks, white papers, all that sort of thing. So there's a lot of writing and editing, but there's also definitely a component of consulting, advising, and research, which is mainly literature research at this point. So it's a nice mix of things. And then there's the part that comes with running a freelance business is that it's more than just doing the work. It's also doing accounting and, sending your clients invoice and make sure that they pay you, and keeping track of everything for running your taxes and all of that, as well as marketing yourself, which is the biggest challenge for me, to be honest, and networking and meeting new people. So what I really love is that my clients are all over the world, and so I really have the option to work with literally anyone, which makes it gives you the opportunity to get lots of different types of work, and that keeps things challenging, and you keep learning new things every day, which is real fun. So I think that's mainly my day-to-day, highly variable.
Well, thank you. It looks like COVID has kind of put us all in a similar working from home situation. And we actually have a question from the audience. Somebody is asking, what tips do you have to maintain work-life balance when working from home? And anybody is free to answer that.
I can start. For me, I think it's important that you create an environment where you can work properly, so have a good setup, and also to close your laptop at some point at the end of the day and really get away from it. And yeah, especially during a pandemic when things are locked down, go for walks, be in nature and that sort of thing. I don't have kids, so I cannot speak to that experience. I'm sure that's a lot more challenging. So maybe there's some extra advice there, but yeah.
Yeah, I guess like similarly to Maartje, like I don't have kids either. But working from home, like I've created this little office for myself in one of the spare rooms, and I got myself a new desk, got myself a new chair that I just received this afternoon. So I'm really excited. And I think the biggest challenge for me is that I'm so used to working all the time. Like in my postdoc, when you do mice work or even cell culture work, you know, like you're always there on the weekends, you're there at night, you're there all over the place because your cells depend on you for survival. And so coming into this government job where, you know, it's expected to only work from 9 to 5, or if you're in the hospital from 7 to 3. And if you overwork, then people look at you weirdly. So other people don't like it when you overwork because it makes them look bad, which is one of those things about government and working close with unionized people. But for me, I find like a nice glass of wine at supper time really marks that divide. Not the healthiest of habits, but for me, like supper marks the end of the day. And like Maartje said, close your laptop. Just don't open it again. And I have a work phone, so sometimes I keep on checking it a little bit just to make sure there's no important emails coming in. But otherwise, I just try to keep a normal pace of 9 to 5.
I don't think I should answer this question. I'm hoping that I will have a better work-life balance when my kids go back to school, which is later this week and next week, because I have a first grader and a junior kindergartner. So I have no work-life balance. I have no like line. It's all blurred. I'm literally like working on my computer in the dark after I've said goodnight to my kids and they're waiting for me so they can fall asleep while I'm in the room. And I'm like, do. So yeah, I could maybe answer or contribute to that next year. It's one of my goals for 2021.
Sounds good. No, being a mom is a full-time job, so I don't think you could really get a break from that. But we'll move on to our next question from the audience. So someone has asked, how much of your education was directly applicable to your current roles? And what were the biggest learning curves that you faced?
Oh, go ahead, Marie.
Well, for me, I think what I got from my education that I had no idea was very valuable until I left academia was my ability to do presentations. So in academia, we kind of normalize giving presentations to your research team, to go to conferences, to give posters. And honestly, that's a skill that not everyone has. Also, if you've ever written a thesis, putting a thesis together, a lab report, like your writing skills are so important, and that's not something that everybody gets. Like I have a PhD, so I worked a lot at it throughout my PhD. And so those were some of the skills that I really brought along with me, along with like being part of a team and knowing how to be part of a team, like a really good team player and work together and collaboration. Like Nicole's mentioned that in her intro, how important it is. Like it's not about how much you know and how much you can memorize from your studies, but it's more about how well you work with other people. So if you can get along, if you're easygoing, or like it's how you collaborate within an ecosystem that makes you really valuable in the workplace. And so that's something that I didn't know, but it turns out it works great for me now. So
I was just going to say, I was actually trying to think of what wasn't applicable, like, because right now, like what I learned in my graduate study is actually very applicable as background knowledge for what I'm doing. But what let's say that wasn't the case. And let's say I was working on not like vaccine or virus stuff. I would still say like leveraging all of the experience of like Marie said, writing your thesis is huge. So like that's a huge undertaking. Don't undermine that. I find a lot of graduate students and HQP might be kind of like, oh well, you know, like, but like no, seriously, like that's huge. And so that's like basically like you led a large project that had multiple like parts to it that all came together into this formative piece that you are like authored, and then you had to go and defend it, and like all these experts basically like tried to rip it apart while you like made it like hold water. So like it's huge. And then also like in terms of just like when I was doing research both in my graduate studies and in my postdoc, it was very collaborative. In order to like succeed in collaborative research, you need to understand how to leverage other people's skills so you know what you want to achieve. So it's not going to be the best path to try and do everything yourself. Like if you know someone that's really good at flow cytometry, you go like be like, okay, so we have this awesome project. Like, can you be on board like and help either like advise this part or do this part, and like you can contribute, you can get authorship, and like, and then like if you know someone else that's like really good at something else, and like be like, are you interested in joining? And like to try and like if your goal is to like have that project succeed, that's the goal. It's not like that you do all of it. Like, and I feel like that's a huge lesson to learn, is like how to basically like, you know, figure out how you can not only work well with other people in terms of like personal like interactions, but like leverage everyone's strengths and weaknesses, and leverage everyone's like what they love and what they hate into like a project that everyone really can like find footing in and care about finishing. So that's definitely something that I think I started doing in my graduate studies for sure, with a lot of collaborative projects where we had other labs that were working on things with us, and definitely working with Dr. Diallo as well. So yeah, collaborative projects, networking.
And that probably helped you a lot with your current position as a project coordinator, because I'm assuming a lot of what you do has to do with placing and finding the right people for a project.
Yeah, and not like hesitating, like if there's a certain type of evidence we need and it's a group that I've never talked to before, like I can find out like who the best contact is, but then to like just go and be like, hi, my name's Nicole, I'm working on this file, like nice to meet you, I'd like to see how we can work together, I'm gonna set up a call, and then just set up that call, like, you know, like just like, and not hesitate and just do it. And I feel like that sounds really weird, but like in government, I think like in normal times too, like there's this whole like you want to talk to people at the same level as you shenanigans that happens quite a lot. And like I don't know, I started in the middle of like a pandemic, so like not, it's like all these things are not applicable anymore, but like basically just to like figure out how to get it done and get it done, and you meet a lot of cool people along the way too.
I think that's a really good tip for networking as well. It's just reach out to people like that. Thank you. Maartje, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I very much agree with everything that's already been said. Like project management, dealing with a lot of different factors really helps with anything you might do next. I think one of the things that also really helps me is just persistence and dealing with rejection sort of experience, which you encounter a lot because, you know, you apply for different projects and you'll get a lot of rejections, which is super common in academia as well. And so, you know, it's not about you, but just the way it is. So that is very much helping me, and just general research skills help with pretty much anything you do as well, because you need them for almost everything. And I think we see now in society that when people don't really have research skills, it leads to problems. So yeah, even setting up my business, that like those research skills and the project management and all of that really helped me get that going. And yeah, like you said, the writing is of course essential for me as well.
And Maartje, what were some of the learning curves that you had to overcome, or what were some, because obviously starting a business is a really big undertaking and has a lot of little components to it. So what were some of the biggest challenges that you had to face for that?
Yeah, I think really just getting started and finding clients, that is the hard part to get started on, because yeah, on the one hand, like the entire world is available to you, but at the same time, it's like, how do you find people? So that is a learning curve and still something I'm developing. But also the aspects that come next to just this exact work you do is, like I said, the bookkeeping and filing for taxes, all of that sort of work is something you haven't really done before, and that is definitely a steep learning curve. But there's lots of resources to be found online and people you could contact for it. So indeed, again, networking and learning from others is super essential for all of that, and has really helped me get where I am right now.
Thank you so much. And that actually kind of leads us to the next audience question is, did you have a mentor? If so, how did you find your mentor and how did your relationship work?
I can talk about mentors for sure. Sorry, I have a bunch of weird stuff that's coming up on my screen from Zoom. Okay, so yeah, I know I definitely had a few really awesome mentors in my experiences, and I think like Dr. Diallo was definitely a mentor of mine, and basically like seeing how, you know, he had a discovery that he figured out in his postdoc, and then he just basically like went into uncharted territories to try and set up a startup after setting up a lab, like, and just like all of like, you know, figuring things out like that, like are completely foreign to you, but like, you know, just this is what we need to do, so we're gonna figure it out, and just like trumping ahead and making things happen. And yeah, like I think I learned a lot from his project management skills, and like having a lab that had so many different projects and so many different people, you know, working and actually doing awesome science at the same time. And you know, I think that was definitely a great first one of my first mentors, and also my PhD supervisor was a great mentor as well. And yeah, so I think like there's a lot that you have along the way too. Like I find that every job I've had, I found someone that I've really identified with, that I can kind of see and learn from. And I have one at the Public Health Agency of Canada as well. Like she's a medical advisor, and she's just fantastic and works crazy. So not very inspirational for work-life balance, but just same thing, like, you know, not trained to do X, Y, Z, but we need to get it done. So we're going to get it done. We're going to find people that know this as experts. We're going to, like, it's almost like we're not going to say no, we're just going to make it happen sort of attitude that I just keep seeing in people, and it really resonates with me.
Thank you. Marie or Maartje, would you like to add anything?
Similar to Nicole, I've had a lot of mentors along the way. My PhD supervisor was very supportive, where I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and he really coached me into, you know, really pushing me to do the best that I can do. And that's how I ended up doing a PhD in his lab, which was very motivating. I think like the best mentors you should latch onto are the people that give you value and that know the value that you have and support you through it. So in my current position, I would say my partner was a big mentor, because he's the project manager and he's been working in government for a few years. So he helped me put my resume together. He helped me put these fancy words in my cover letter that I had no idea existed, like talking about research environment and strategic implementation and project management words that are just very cliche, but I didn't know. And even like my current mentor, also like in the management world, is my boss, who's also happens to be a grad school colleague from back in the day. And so we get along great, and he's just really emotionally intelligent, and really like I look up to him essentially. Like he's really good at strategic thinking. He's really good at like relationships within the workplace. And anyways, it's nice to look at someone and just like pull different parts of what you like about them and then mesh them together so that you can learn. Because I definitely had to learn. I started this job in January 2020, so 6 weeks before the pandemic. And so a lot of it I had to learn on my own. So little tidbits along the way from my coworkers, how to manage, especially online. It's not easy. Yeah, different people in your life, just look up to them, and especially if they make you feel good and if they value you as a person and push you, then those are people you want to surround yourselves with.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Mary.
very much agree with all of that. Like, have the people around you. It doesn't have to be your supervisor, for instance, but it can be anyone you work with who can stimulate and challenge you. That's always important. And then, yeah, I found especially with changing careers, it's important to talk to people who already are doing that. And even if it's just online or just sending an email here and there, it can be extremely helpful. And I've also found there's a lot of online communities that people join in and give each other advice, and they're extremely helpful. So for instance, I took this course on how to set a freelance medical writing business, and everyone who ever took the course is entered in this Facebook group, and it's extremely helpful. Everyone's just helping each other out. And so wherever you are, whatever you do, whatever you want to do, you can find these people who can help guide you and stimulate you to do the best you can do. And yeah, I think that is super important, to learn from these people and find your way that way.
Thank you. Lots of really, really good advice. We'll move on to the next question from somebody in the audience. They're asking, how do you keep yourself up to date in your field? i.e., what do you read? Do you set time aside for this?
Yeah, I'll start. I read a lot. So there's like science articles, and then anytime I enter a new project, which is usually on new topics, there is a lot of reading involved. So yeah, I really see that as part of my job. So that is one of the things that is just part of it. So setting time aside for that, for sure. I also, when it comes to running freelance business, I read lots of blogs, but also listen to podcasts, especially on my daily walks to be out of the work. But then I listen to podcasts, people advising on how to run those. And then I still am involved in organization and cancer immunotherapy. We provide free weekly newsletters with summaries of the latest published articles. So I write for them, and that really keeps me updated in this field specifically as well, which I really love, to just stay in touch with all of the cancer immunotherapy awesomeness that is going on. So yeah, lots of reading, but I see it as part of the job, really.
I can follow up as well. In terms of the keeping on top of literature, specifically for what I'm working on right now, it's been great because I was part of founding a team that actually is doing like a living evidence poll for COVID-19, like research articles that has to do with anything on vaccines or immunogenicity or immune response to the virus or the vaccine. And so it's like a team of, I think there's 8 of us now, including the 2 interns that are amazing. And basically they send out a daily email, and they also have a massive Zotero web-based database of tagged entries. And so like everything is kind of like, take home message of it, and then like a link out, and then it's like organized by like what type, like what it hits on in terms of subject matter. And then there's like a highlights reel at the top. And so like, it's basically like for busy people that need to see all the evidence every day, they can like do it while they're drinking their 3rd coffee of the day, as opposed to like doing it all themselves and scouring for themselves. So it's been really cool. And previous to that, I think definitely I had to be disciplined to take time out of my day and like try and see what was going on and stay in my field. I think I was always just like try and see whatever was being published, like in virology specifically, and like high impact publications, just to make sure I wasn't missing any seminal stuff, but it was more like, okay, what's been published in Nature this week, you know, whenever I had time, and just to try and carve out some extra time over a lunch break or something.
Yeah, so in my world, I definitely don't do research reading anymore. So there are papers out there, but it's mostly around policy that I read. So I'm deeply involved in policy and like international research regulations and good clinical practice. That's my world now. And so when I read what other people are doing across Canada. So going to their website, seeing what kind of guidelines there are. It's a little bit difficult to stay up to date with like new guidelines, but essentially I try to stay in touch with all the webinars, and even in my field, we go to conferences. So there's an RAB conference that's Canadian wide. And so a lot of information that I get to stay on top of my job is located there. So it's really about, just keeping in touch with people across Canada and discussing different policies and regulations that are going to come out, making sure I'm on these email lists so that I do get those newsletters and information. A little bit away from academic journals and a totally different kind of reading.
Thank you. I guess we can see how important it is, though, to kind of keep in touch with your role and make sure that you're on top of that and know what's going on, especially, I suppose, policies must change quite a bit. And I'm assuming during COVID, they probably changed a lot.
Yeah, so really the world went shifting upside down. So Health Canada is it takes time for policies to get developed, but COVID forced a lot of change really, really fast. And so they put out this interim order where it was temporary policy guidelines for all clinical trials. And during that time, we had to learn those guidelines, apply them, and we also had to teach our research community what those guidelines were. And so it was a lot of trying to keep up to date, and I was new too. So like it was very overwhelming because it was new for everyone, including myself.
I can imagine. I think it was difficult for us too, just the general public, to figure out what the guidelines were. So I can only imagine how difficult it was for you to stay on top of that. We'll go on to our next question from the audience. So somebody has asked, what is your advice to transition from academia to federal government research? So I suppose Nicole might be the best person to answer that one.
Yep. So there's two non-exclusive approaches, like non-mutually exclusive approaches. So the first would be leveraging any and all networking that you have. But then in addition to that, really showing that you're proactive in your own right to find the job. So what I mean by that is like the whole hiring process for federal like employees is super Greek language. It's super like insiders club, like it's really weird. And you really have, it's like an art, like I'm sure that BioCan has HQP training courses on this, or else they have in the past, or it's its own subject for sure, but like it's like all about like keywords and hitting things on the nose and showing how things are applicable. But basically what I'm saying is like you apply for any and all jobs that would make sense to the classification of the job that it is, even if it's like of a subject matter that you're like, oh my God. So like a really good example is like pest management in Health Canada always has like a lot of biologist positions. And it's like, okay, obviously anyone that's in cancer immunotherapy most likely doesn't have like any pesticide related like research experience. But then like you take a step back and you're like, okay, but they're looking for a biologist. Okay. So, and they say that they're going to make like a pool of candidates. So if you take a step back and you're like, what does that mean? It means that if you can jump through those hoops and you can end up in this pool, so to speak, they basically say you meet all those criteria for a biologist that could work at Health Canada of whatever level they're looking for, because it's a numerical level. And then even if you don't get the job for pest management, for example, you could leverage the fact that you're in that pool to go along with your networking and say, hey, like, I remember you, like we went to a conference together. It was so nice to see you. I see you're working in this role with cancer immunotherapy drugs at Health Canada. I actually just got pre-vetted in a by 3 pool, and I'm looking to find like my next opportunity. Like, please let me know if there's anything would be, good spot for me. I'm happy to have a conversation. So like that's way more like useful and like something that someone can like help you with, like if they're in government and wanting to help you find a job, than just being interested. Because unfortunately, like it's pretty hard to get a job without a application process. And so I would say like start early, like a year before you want that job or a year and a half before. Apply for every job. Like it's probably going to be a biologist position, I'd imagine, for most people on this call. But like it doesn't matter if it's in pest management, it doesn't matter anything. You might have to like learn a little bit about pest management to like complete a test, but like literally they're asking you, okay, biologist, can you pivot so like 180 degrees that you can figure out pest management crap in like a week to take this test and not fail it? Great, because we know from your CV that you don't do anything on this, but now we know that you can pivot and that you are like a really awesome person and really smart. So like you have to just kind of play the game. So I hope that makes sense. So like figure it out yourself, but also leverage your networks at the same time.
Yeah, I'd like to add on that too, because my experience was a little different. So yeah, like it took me a year to find a job essentially. So don't give up. I got a lot of rejection. The biggest tip is learn how to write a proper resume. And like Nicole said, look at the job description and put as many keywords in there as you can. Like, even if they're kind of not that relevant, just try to fit them in, because the way they look at it, HR looks at your CV. HR knows nothing about biology, knows nothing about, like the science, or perhaps like what is really required in the technicalities of the job, but they know how to pick people out of a pile. And so the more keywords that you have in there that really stand out, the better it is. Also learn how to write a really good cover letter. So once you have that package, then you can send it off. And yeah, like Nicole, I had to network. So because I've always lived in Halifax, I went through Dal, I went through grad school in Halifax, and then I got my postdoc in Halifax. I just never left. I don't know why, I've always wanted to, but it helps to just know a lot of people that point you in the right direction. And when I was looking for jobs, I was on Indeed.com, and I just looked every day, 3 times a day. It was a full-time job looking for a job. So don't get discouraged, and really talk to different people who might know how to put the right resume together, because it is hard. I found it personally hard going from a CV to a resume. Like, all your publications go into one sentence saying you have publications. So I don't know how it was for Nicole, but I had to summarize mine, and it was sad.
But if it's for a research job, you might still want to put your publications in. Just wanted to put that in.
Yeah, mine wasn't a research job, so that's why I had to summarize all my abstract and all my papers into a one-liner, and said I obtained like this amount in funding over like the past 10 years, and that was it. That was my academic journey on my resume. So if you're not looking for a research job, and it's more on like an administrative job perhaps, then that's what you have to do.
Thank you. And I think we'll go on to our last question now, since we're at 2:53, that it's what is your advice to transition from research into more management roles, whether it be managing a team, project, or business?
Well, I can go first on this one. So I've supervised a lot of students, and managing a team of students or managing students is very different from managing a team of adults that are older than you, most likely. And so that's like one thing to really recognize, is that they want something different, and the way you manage them is completely different. It's all about relationships, get along with them, making sure that you make them feel valuable. Like, as a manager, your job is to make sure that your team can accomplish the job that they do and do it well, like lift them up, make sure that they know that they are valued. And then I had another thought. Oh yeah, and the other thought is like I've read a lot of blogs on management, on conflict resolution. Conflict resolution is a big one that employers do look for when you look for management or director positions. And so anything that you can read online about different management skills, different situation, there's a lot of books on strategy. Yeah, it's always good to look at those soft skills kind of blog or articles, because it really does provide an alternate perception on what we've learned so far.
Yeah, for me, the management, well, obviously I have to manage myself, but I also manage every single client basically. So yeah, soft skills are super essential. And I think I did learn a lot of that in academia, but it's definitely something that you keep on developing. And I agree with Marie that yeah, learning, reading a line about management, negotiation, that sort of things are really important and something we don't get much training in, especially negotiation. And yeah, to obtain the confidence to really be able to do that properly, yeah, you need to kind of dive into that and find some like pointers as to how to approach it, etc. So I think that's very important. And yeah, it definitely helps to have had supervised students and that sort of thing, or be involved in organizations, etc. during when you're a student. That can really help you develop these sorts of skills a bit. And but yeah, once you're dealing with adults in, like, let's say the real world, things are a bit different, but it's a thing that you can keep on learning, really.
I think the only thing I can add is like, I was just trying to think of when I was in grad school, I carved out some management opportunities that didn't exist before. Like I don't know, like my PhD supervisor was going to be on sabbatical, and so I was doing my master's, but I was kind of like just like the organizer of things, and so he was kind of like seeing me in that role, and I was like, it's almost like I'm the lab manager, and then he was like, actually, and then I ended up being the lab manager as like the most junior master's student, and I don't recommend that. Like all of the students hated me, and we're friends now, but it was like really crappy for like 2 years when I was lab manager. And then when I switched to PhD, I was like, no, we're not doing this anymore. But yeah, so that was an example. And then like, there's other ones, like you can literally just like, especially when you're in grad school and you can kind of like manage your own time a little bit more than any other time in your life. I think like you can do things like you can all of a sudden start a journal club. You can all of a sudden decide you want to do a regional conference. I'm not kidding. Like, especially now that they can be virtual, like you can really organize it. And like, if you have some weird niche field and you really want to get someone in your field to be a guest speaker, but there's no way you can do it, organize a conference in your niche field and then invite him as a guest speaker. And then like, you can be like I organize this conference. And like, so it's kind of like outside of comfort zone possibly for a lot of people, but like, you can literally like write your CV by things that you would like to do anyways, and take them on, and then like out of those things you can be like, I manage this, I project manage this, you have to kind of think that like I came up with the idea, I planned it, I executed it, and then we wrote a report on it afterwards about how we would do it differently next time, or like, you know what I mean? Like you can kind of like turn it into a normal job thing, like by how you spin things. And so even all those publications that you might have to put in one line, if you're applying for a policy job, you could potentially leverage all of those publications, but because those are all projects you managed, and those are all reports that you wrote. And those are those are collaborative team projects that were multidisciplinary and blah, 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 blah. Like there's like 15 different ways you can skin one project to like check off boxes of all these different soft skills. Like it's like an art. So you just have to like think of it with different perspectives. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, I can definitely work past management. So.
Ditto.
That seems like a really, really good skill to have, yeah, is being able to extrapolate from your experiences and look at it from the different perspectives. But we have 1 minute left, so I'd like to thank our panelists for joining us here today. This was a really, really informative session, I think. Thank you guys so much for coming and joining us here today. And I'm not sure, but we have our next session coming up, our Where Are They Now series part 3 on September 30th. And I believe we'll put that into the chat, the link for you to register for that. But thank you so much, everybody. We'll be ending our session now.
And I'd just like to echo Rita and thank you all for participating. For those of you who do want the link, I will actually add that now, so I won't log out just yet. So stay tuned if you do want the link for the summit and other online opportunities or training opportunities. So with that being said, thank you to our panelists. Great discussion.
We actually have a raised hand, Megan.
Oh, okay, are you able to stay for a few quick minutes? You can always do that when I'm typing here if you're okay with it. Rita, do you mind managing that one?
Mm-hmm. So I'll just say allowed to talk and ask to unmute. Hi, Ranjan, did you have a question for our panelists? Perhaps it was an accidental hand raise.
Okay, great. So so for the panelists, feel free to take off. I'm going to stay on just because I just posted into the chat box and I'll let participants read that. But otherwise, see you guys again soon. The only other thing I would add is that our community is quite small. I think you really highlighted that, and it's always good to get to know the other folks in the network and across Canada. So you really evidenced that. So thank you for that. Take care, everyone.
Yeah, take care. Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Thank you. Okay, and so I will post that here. There we go. Just wait a quick moment since it was a few minutes delayed. We can stop recording.